Welcome to Indian Masterminds once again, and today we are going to talk to you about your stint at the center after launching so many things in EPIDA. You joined Labour Ministry, and now tell us, in Labour Ministry, how did you get to launch one of the most coveted and prestigious schemes launched by Government of India, Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana RSBY, which has been replicated by many other countries, including and the World Bank.
What happened was, when I joined the Labour Ministry, in the first couple of months, I discovered nothing happens there.
Yeah.
And I used to jokingly say that nothing happens here because we are all in labour, and by definition, we can't deliver. And if you deliver, you are out of labour. But something unusual happened. The Prime Minister announced a health insurance scheme for the poorest of the poor. And as was the want of that government, UPA government, they set up a group of ministers headed by Mr. Chidambaram. And when this group of ministers met on that particular day, my minister was not available, secretary couldn't go. So I was deputed to go to that meeting. And when the meeting started, Mr. Chidambaram turned towards the Secretary, Banking and Insurance and asked him to formulate the details of the scheme. The secretary said, "Sir, we are already struggling with the existing universal health insurance scheme. It seems to be going nowhere." And he said that he may not be in a position to do that. Then he turned towards the health ministry and asked them to do it because they said, this is a health insurance scheme. So they were also very reluctant to do that. In that case, the meeting came to a grinding halt. Who should do this?
Neither the health ministry nor the insurance.
They didn't. So an additional secretary of finance department whispered something into the ears of Mr. Chidambaram. I don't know what she said. But suddenly I heard my name announced. Who's Anil Swarup? So I stood up with the folded hands. I said, I am Anil. He said, you will do that scheme. No, this is how the decision was taken. So I said, sir, what does Labour Ministry do with this health insurance scheme? He said, this scheme is for the workers. And hence, you should do this. I said, by that definition, every scheme of the government is for workers. Every scheme should come to me. So he said, no, you'll do it. I didn't know what had hit me, because I had no clue whatsoever of health insurance. That's the beginning of health insurance.
And that also says volumes about your reputation.
No, I don't know. He knew me personally. Perhaps he didn't. I don't think it was anything to do with my reputation. It was just trying to palm off a particular thing that was supposed to be done by somebody else.
The additional secretary must have.
That could have been a reason, but I don't know. That's how it happened. But then, of course, I got in touch with World Bank, with ILO, with GIZ. All these organizations got together and we formulated the scheme, which came then to be recognized as one of the finest in the world.
When you didn't know anything about insurance, nothing about health, so how did you get to?
This takes me to the question that you asked me earlier.
Yeah.
Of being a generalist and a specialist. The beauty of a generalist is, which I enjoyed thoroughly, was to get hold of experts to help. Because I don't hold any prejudice, I don't hold any expertise. One had an open mind. One could sit around with an experts, get them together and get them to formulate a scheme. And as it got formulated, I also understood this more and more. I didn't know anything about health. I never worked in the health sector. I never worked in the insurance sector. But I did manage to get those men and women who were experts, could sit around a table and formulate that scheme. They did all the walking and I was doing all the talking.
And what were the basic ingredients of this?
The reason, and I'm jumping the gun a bit, reason why the scheme did well as compared to many other schemes of the government is that we looked at the beneficiary, the consumer, and tried to understand the consumer before formulating the scheme. Now, this consumer or this beneficiary was poor, and hence he could not pay the premium money upfront or hospital money upfront for him to get the benefit. So the scheme had to be cashless. That was one.
Yeah.
Number two, this person was by and large illiterate. Most of the poor people are illiterate. So I couldn't have had documents, which he didn't understand. Insurance documents are in any case very finely printed. You don't read them. I couldn't burden him with that document. So the scheme had to be paperless. Now, whereas there were indeed cashless schemes available, there was not a single paperless insurance scheme anywhere in the world. So this was a challenge. And the third, another challenge that we faced was that all these people had to travel from their place to other places for work. And hence the benefit had to be portable. During that time, now it's different. During that time, whether it was PDS, whether it was MNREGA, the benefits were available only in the place of his residence. If he traveled out of his place, he couldn't avail the benefits of MNREGA or PDS, or for that matter, any government scheme. So I had to provide them portable benefits. Now here technology became handy because we came up with the smart card technology where actually it made the scheme paperless because all details were put in the chip. And since it was put in the chip, it was paperless. The entitlement was also put in the chip. He doesn't have to pay in advance. And he could carry that smart card anywhere in the country and it could be valid. So we managed to take care of all these three aspects of the beneficiary through technology. And that was one reason why this scheme succeeded.
Cashless, paperless, and portable. So was it the first smart card being issued by the government in the country at the time?
Yes. This was the first ever smart card issued. There were smart cards in the form of credit cards or debit cards that individuals used.
But by the government?
By the government. This was the first ever smart card issued by the government. And it was a very complex sort of technology. There were 11 sets of software writing to make this happen. I mean, I'm not going into those details. I was not conversant with technology at all. But over a period of time, as people came and explained, one came to understand those sets of technology also. Still, back-end technology I still didn't understand, but the front-end part I did.
If it was such a foolproof smart card, so why couldn't the government write other schemes also on the same card?
That was my idea. Okay. My idea, since you mentioned World Bank wanted to engage me separately to do this scheme in another 15 countries. I had a formal offer from them. But I stayed back, not joined the World Bank, because I wanted to do precisely what you're telling me. Because my view was that chip, that 64 KB chip then, could be used for PDS, could be used by MNREGA, for a variety of government schemes.
Even Aadhaar.
Sorry?
Even Aadhaar details could be fed into that.
Absolutely, they could be fitted there. Of course, now with improvement in internet connectivity, you don't really require that chip or a card. Because now in real time, you can actually verify from backend database.
Yeah.
The reason for offline system was that at that point in time, the country was not so well connected as it is today. I'm talking of 2007.
Right.
Almost 15, 16 years ago. So then the technology was not advanced enough for people to reach out and avail benefits by connecting themselves to a central server. Now you can. Now, by and large, most of the part of the country. That is why today Ayushman Bharat does not ride on smart card. There is a backend database and all hospitals are able to access that backend database because of internet connectivity. In those days, a large number of hospitals were not 24/7 connected. So if an emergency happens, a patient goes to a hospital and connectivity is not there, how does a hospital verify whether the person who's coming to the hospital is the right person, number one. Number two, whether he has the requisite amount left in the insurance for him to do it. So these are sets of information that were then housed on the chip and could be verified offline. But now, of course, it can be done on the back-end basis, which is being done under Ayushman Bharat.
Now, maybe since it's such a, so much time has lapsed, so not many people would remember, but let me recall that this chip had 30,000 rupees loaded in it.
Yes.
For 5 members of a family.
Yes, that's right.
Which they could use every year, and next year another set of 30,000 would be loaded. And they could get treatment from any
empaneled. They were
even private hospitals.
Yeah, both private and public. There were more than 8,000 hospitals that were empaneled through the country.
This is for the first time that even private hospitals were offering services to the poor.
Yes. For the first time, we were leveraging the private healthcare infrastructure to provide. The best part of the scheme was it provided choice to a poor man to walk into even a private hospital and be treated like a VIP because he carried that entitlement with him.
And the hospitals could refuse.
Usually they didn't. Some of them did, but usually they didn't.
Mm-hmm. And how much was the government expenditure into it?
If I remember correctly, at that point in time, the budget was around 2,000 crores.
And it was benefiting how many people?
See, the coverage was the overall coverage, meaning people who were covered under insurance,
Right.
about 350 million, 35 crore people were covered. That's the BPL number in the country. Entire BPL population is covered.
And the World Bank co-opted it.
World Bank's role was very limited to the extent of providing technical assistance. Initially, there weren't very many people agreeing to help. There was a risk involved. We were doing something really funny, something which hadn't happened earlier, paperless, cashless, portable. There were a couple of gentlemen in the World Bank who were posted here in Delhi. They bought this idea and they provided the initial technical funding to run this on experimental basis. Later on, of course, we funded it. But the first step was very difficult, because you have to first have belief that this sort of a system will work. It had never happened. It had not happened anywhere in the world. We were trying it for the first time. So it was really nice of those people from the World Bank. A person I can't forget, Robert Palacios. He took a risk in funding that.
And the World Bank replicated the scheme in many other countries.
No, they didn't. World Bank doesn't replicate itself. What it does is uses that model and allows other countries to look at it.
Trains them also, provides know-how.
Yeah.
And probably US President Barack Obama also invited you.
No, he did.
Yeah.
What had happened was, when the scheme was doing well around that time, he became president, and US was having this problem in India.
Yeah, health insurance.
So one of his advisors approached me.
Yeah.
And he asked me whether I could make a presentation in the US, in Washington. So initially I was very reluctant because the context is very different. What can I tell the US about health insurance? But he insisted. So when in one of the visits to Washington, I used to go to the World Bank. I was invited to Brookings Institute, which houses these advisors.
Yeah.
Where I then made a presentation on RSBY before these advisors, from our own people, from our own mission in Washington, from some of the state of Washington, D.C. They were also there. There were also representatives of funding agencies like Gates Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation. They were all there where I made a presentation.
So in one of your books, you have also written about an Indian mediating a dispute between Pakistanis in...
That was very interesting. When this scheme started doing well,
Yeah.
there was an attempt by as you had mentioned, by World Bank for other countries to understand what is happening here so that they could be replicated there. So we never met in Delhi or Islamabad because we are at so-called war with each other.
Yes.
So we used to meet in other countries. We met in Dubai, we met in Maldives, we also met in Bangkok. This incident is in Bangkok, where I made a presentation on RSBY, and the Pakistani team felt that it's a very good scheme. It could be done in Pakistan also. But the problem in Pakistan was that the federal government, it called it, the central government is called the federal government. Federal government want to do it totally, and they were also representatives of the state of Punjab.
Yeah.
In Pakistan. They said, we will do it. So the question was ownership, who will do it? So I made both of them sit down. And I explained to them, in India also we had this problem, and we are doing it in partnership with each other. The state and the center are partnering. And then they tended to agree with me. Yes, they should partner. And that's why I jokingly say that on that evening, probably I would have solved the Kashmir problem.
So one more thing. Since it was precursor to Ayushman Bharat Yojana, so how did you explain this to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, under what circumstances?
Oh, this is a very interesting incident. This was 3 months before my retirement, actually. I got a call from Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, who I had worked with earlier. So he asked me that, can you come over and brief the Prime Minister about health insurance? So I was a bit flummoxed. I said, what have I to do with health insurance? I'm Secretary Education, Education Government of India. He said, no, you have done insurance. And we've been trying to explain to the Prime Minister the health insurance model. And he doesn't seem to appreciate the fact of insurance model. So I said, sir, but what is my locus standi? He said, when you come over, and we will have a review of education also along with the health. So your presence will be there. And if the Prime Minister asks you, explain to him. So next evening, I went over to Seven Race Course, where a few of us, 10 of us were sitting there. And a presentation was made by the Health Secretary about the insurance model. And when she made that presentation, the Prime Minister still didn't feel convinced. He almost said, "Ye to aapne pehle bhi kaha tha." So then he turned towards me and he asked me, "Anil ji, aap rahe insurance mein, aapka kya isme khayal hai?" So I spoke for about 15 minutes explaining to him the need for insurance, the necessity for insurance, the relevance of insurance in health. He heard me out for 15 minutes. And contrary to the general view, he doesn't speak much during the meetings. He's a very patient listener. So he heard me out. And after I had spoken, he said, "Haan, Anil ji, aap theek kehte hain." And that day, Ayushman Bharat, of course, it was, the name was given later on, was born. Because he was convinced that insurance could be a model for health insurance. And when I was walking out, the joint secretary, one of the joint secretaries to the PM, he asked me, "Sir, आपको तो पता था, नाराज हो जाते हैं इंश्योरेंस के नाम से, फिर भी आपने वही बात कही." हमने कहा, "साहब, मैंने तो जो ठीक समझा वो मैंने कह दिया उनसे. बाकी अगर उनको नहीं समझ में आती तो वो जाने, मुझे ना उनसे आज कुछ चाहिए ना रिटायरमेंट."
So otherwise, what was the model being discussed? Not insurance.
The point was, the Prime Minister was somehow, I mean, that's my impression of him, was of the belief that insurance company only make money, they don't provide benefits. So I explained to him, how does insurance help? And what I told him was as follows. So I'll quickly tell you. I told him, you can give money to the individual, but then he will be exploited by the hospital, because it's that poor man with money that you give him going to the hospital.
Yeah, right.
So instead of giving him the money, you give him an entitlement and let the money be paid by the insurance company.
Right.
Since my liability is limited to the premium that I would have paid, insurance company will think twice before giving the money to the hospital.
Right.
And insurance company can keep a better check on the hospital as compared to the common man going there.
Right.
I told him, even you and I go to the hospital and the hospital wala tells me this, can you contest it? I have no way to contest it. But the insurance has expertise to contest that. That is one.
Right.
Second, it limits your liability, meaning thereby that the insurance company will bid for a premium multiplied by the number of beneficiaries, the premium that you pay. Your liability for that year is fixed. Here you don't know the liability because everyone who goes to the hospital, you keep paying to him.
Right.
So you don't really know what your liability is. And finally, he had this apprehension that insurance company will hike the premium. I said they can't, because it will be a competitive bid between insurance companies. And let us assume, for the sake of argument, that if they do benefit 1 year, next year the premium will come down because other insurance company will bid lower. So through a competitive bidding, the premium can be brought out to a realistic level. I explained to him it happened in RSBY. I mean, premium, what we had thought was for a 30,000 cover, the premium that we had fixed was 750. It never reached 750. In fact, it kept coming.
500, 600.
So that's what competition does.
So in certain states, Ayushman Bharat is running on insurance model, and in remaining states, it's government.
State model.
State model. Thank you so much, Mr. Swarup. Very nice information, very nice discussion about RSBY. Thank you so much for talking to Indian Masterminds.